Hi, my name is Emma Christensen, and today I will be presenting my final presentations for Comms 411. Okay, so for my final presentation, I decided to focus and kind of code the difference between Western and Eastern romantic comedy television shows. Kind of specifically code the relationship progression in between the two different TV shows. So a romantic comedy is defined as a movie or play that deals with love in a light and humorous way. Romantic comedies date back to Shakespeare and with plays like Midsummer's Night Dream and Much Ado About Nothing. The first rom-coms began in the early 1900s and were silent films. Sherlock Jr. was one of the first romantic comedies to be released in film in 1924, and it told the story of a movie theater projectionist, Buster, and how he longed to become a detective. And he is in love with a beautiful girl, and the movie tells a story about how Buster navigates a new romantic relationship while trying to be a detective. And so I just wanted to show a glimpse of this rom-com to kind of see how rom-com started out and then compare it to what they are today. Okay, so as you can see, we have come a very long way from when rom-coms were first filmed. I love this scene though in Sherlock Jr. and how it kind of captures that innocent love. So we can ask ourselves, why are romantic comedies so popular? And this has to do with something that is nicknamed the love hormone, or also known as oxytocin. And this hormone is naturally produced more highly in females than in males. It is found in the early stages of romantic attraction and can be felt by audiences as an on-screen romance unfolds. It contributes to the popularity of romantic comedies because of its associations with positive relationship memories and its connection to happy hormones. These happy hormones can be considered or are dopamine and serotonin, and they correlate directly with oxytocin and the pleasantries felt while watching romantic comedies bring these neurotransmitter signals. So they literally make us happier and release those happy hormones into our emotions, and who doesn't love that? Another reason why rom-coms are so popular is it has a lot to do with the plot line. So romantic rom-coms are incredibly consistent, and they all have the same typical narrative arc. They meet, a conflict happens, a resolution, and then they live happily ever after. This gives the audience the opportunity to relax more because they know what's going to happen, they know what to expect. And it also allows the audience to become more emotionally attached to the characters because they know the end story, and they know that there's not going to be like a shocking death, a tragical twist. And so they can become emotionally invested without hurting themselves or their emotions. So rom-coms are also all about human connection, and they help remind us that there are so many ways for people to form connections, and that there is an incredible amount of diversity in the characters and settings that keep the stories fresh. They also are bingeable. And so it really can create like an escape from the uncertainty of the world or just like everyday life and struggles. So one of the most popular rom-coms is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And so I just wanted to use this as an example to show the basic structure of a rom-com. So here we see that the boy meets the girl. In this movie, they meet at like a bar, and he just kind of walks up to her, and then their relationship progresses, and then it kind of hits its climax when the boy loses the girl. They kind of both like break out in a fight, and they kind of go their separate ways. And then the boy wins the girl back, so he chases after her, and they end up reconciliating, and they live happily ever after. So from that, I want to move to a new section that and kind of explain a little more about Korean dramas. So Korean dramas, K-dramas, or they're short, what is short for South Korean scripted TV. They're also known as Korean soap operas or Korean rom-coms. They are known for their predictability and their originality, and stick to the classic kind of rags to riches storylines and the typical rom-com narrative arc. And they're very effective at establishing an emotional connection with the viewer. So ever since 2020, K-dramas have become more and more popular. In early 2021, Netflix invested around $500 million to produce more Korean content. And then series like Crash Landing on You became the 6th most watched TV show on Netflix in the US between March 21st and March 27th in 2020. Another American video streaming website that kind of specifically caters to K-dramas and highlights K-dramas saw a 42% increase of subscribers between 2019 and 2022. And then we can ask ourselves, like, why all of a sudden interest in these, and like what rose, or like why are K-dramas becoming more and more popular. And so this kind of led me to my final project and the question I wanted to ask and kind of like research. And so I decided to focus kind of on the relationship progression between the two characters, since that's kind of the core of a romantic comedy. And so I wanted to compare like a popular K-drama alongside a popular American rom-com, in order to figure out what makes people so attracted to K-dramas. So I chose 2 Netflix series. The one on the left is a recently released Netflix series, The Baker and the Beauty. And it's a Miami baker and a fashionista, and they try to make romance work despite the heat they face from family, exes, and being in the public's eye. And then on the right, it's a popular new Korean K-drama, and it's called Business Proposal. And the main character, Hardy, is in disguise as her friend, and she shows up on a blind date to scare away her friend's supposedly blind date, but plans go wrong, and the guy, or the blind date, turns out to be her CEO, and then he makes a proposal by the end of the date. So it kind of just talks about their relationship and how she just how they kind of wind through, and kind of the unexpected twist. So in order to determine these, or in order to kind of track or code, I guess, the relationships, the relationship progression in the movies or in the TV series, I decided to split up kind of the 4 stages of a general like relationship. So I could like, and then, before watching it, I broke down a typical relationship into these 4 stages. So stage 1 is like the initial meeting and like the attraction stage. So it's like how the characters meet, if they meet through friends or in a social group or a restaurant. And like then is it like love at first sight? They immediately click. And and so forth. And then stage 2 is more like the curiosity, interest, and infatuation stage. And that's when they get to know each other better, kind of more on a deeper level. They kind of figure out if they're compatible and start developing or learning each other's likes and dislikes and personality likes. And then stage 3 is kind of the enlightenment stage, or like the becoming a couple stage. So the couple kind of starts dating, becoming more exclusive, become very vulnerable with each other. Trust is a really big part of this stage. And then they kind of talk about commitment and a little bit of the future, but that's more for stage 4, when they have a really good understanding for each other's values, their lifestyle, and goals for the future. In stage 4, they begin to have relationships with friends and families, and open and honest conversations about the future and like where they want to end up, if they want to continue to progress in their relationship and work towards marriage and so forth. So after every episode, I looked at, I kind of put the episode into one of these 4 categories. But first, I kind of wanted to break down more the timeline of these, or describe the show a little better. So in Business Proposal, the timeline kind of is that Taemu, who's the main guy, he goes on a blind date with a disguised Hari, which is the main girl. And then, so that's in episode 1. And then in episode 5, Taemu finds out Hari's true identity, because in the first episode, she wasn't who he thought she was. And then in episode 7, Taemu and Hari kiss, and it's kind of unexpected. They don't really have a lot of attachments right now, or they're not anything official, but there's definitely feelings between both of them and a connection. And then in episode 8, Taemu and Hari start dating in secret. And it's not until episode 10 when Taemu's grandfather finds out about Hari and Taemu and their secret dating relationship. And this is kind of a big climax moment when the grandfather doesn't approve and is trying all these ways to separate them. And then in episode 11, Hari breaks up with Taemu once their relationship goes public, just because of all the pressure and stereotypes and kind of others' input giving her doubts, despite her and Taemu's feelings. And then in episode 12, this is the last episode, Taemu and Hari get back together, but Taemu has to go away. And then when he comes back and proposes to Hari. So they end the season with Hari and Taemu engaged. So that's kind of like the main points of, there's obviously a lot more that goes into it, but kind of the main points of the TV show, or And then on the bottom left, we can see a graph that kind of follows the structure of the film. And I wanted to display this to kind of give a better idea of how it compared to The Baker and the Beauty, which we'll see in a second, but kind of how the plot differs. And in this one, we can kind of see that it's more of a 3-arc structure, where there's kind of 3 big events. So for this one, it's like the first big event is that Taemu finds out that Hari's true identity, and then the second one could be that grandfather finds out about Hari. And then the third one is that they like get back together, and he comes back and they end in a proposal. And so this is kind of different than your typical rom-com structure, where we generally kind of see like a rising action, a climax, and then like another rising action, where this one's kind of 3 climaxes and then like 3 minor falling outs, where like trust may be questioned and so forth. So then we move on to the Baker and the Beauty timeline. So the timeline is a little shorter just because there's only 9 episodes instead of 12. But in the first episode, Noah and Daniel meet, and then they start dating in secret in episode 2. And then Noah meets Daniel's family in episode 4, and the relationship goes public in episode 5. And then Noah breaks up with Daniel in episode 7. And then Noah wants to get back together with Daniel, but Daniel ends up saying no in episode 8. And then in episode 9, Daniel goes to Noah saying to get back together, and she feels the same way. And then kind of just another side thing in episode 9 is they end the season as well with being engaged. So here we can see that it's obvious that the timeline and the relationship is very fast-paced, more so than in Business Proposal, where it's more prolonged. In this one, there is one big climax where everything kind of builds up to the point where they end up breaking up, and then it kind of falls, and then it's spiked again when they decide to get back together, and then they end in an engagement. Okay, so kind of my code findings from these after coding these each episode and categorizing them and then comparing them. So kind of like I said before, after every episode, I went through the 4 stages and placed each episode under one of the 4 stages. So I created this graph as well. So each dot represents an episode, and we can see that in Business Proposal, it's a lot more kind of slower to get into, like, their relationship. It's not as fast as the Baker and the Beauty, where they really just jump into things, and which was interesting to compare, because in the Baker and the Beauty, they never really had a big falling out or like a big consequence or breakup. It was more just little bumps along the way, where in Beauty and the Baker, it was a lot more dramatic, which obviously impacts audiences in different ways, where in Beauty and the Baker, it leaves the audience on edge more, whereas in Business Proposal, it kind of leads the audience on in the same kind of manner with little cliffhangers, but nothing huge. So I found that the characters in the Beauty and the Baker's relationship, like I said earlier, escalated much more quickly than the characters in Business Proposal. So then, looking at it and comparing it to what we learned in class this semester, I really felt like it correlated directly to the theory of mood management. The theory of mood management was created by Dolph Zillman, and he said the following: our entertainment choices are often a function of how we are feeling at the present moment, and how we anticipate exposure to certain media content is likely to make us feel during and following that exposure. So this kind of just talks about how a lot of the times people seeking out rom-coms and this type of genre of movie really want to manage their mood, and they want to escape maybe the hardships and the struggles of everyday life and be filled, as we talked about earlier, with something happy and uplifting and kind of an escape from the world. So we can also, this also has a kind of goes along with the theory of mood management, kind of these principles of the excitatory potential. And this kind of media can influence our levels of psychological arousal, which can have an arousing effect or a calming effect. And this, we can kind of look at the structures of both of the series and the relationship progression. And in The Baker and the Beauty, it obviously had more of an arousing effect because it was much more dramatic, where in The Business Proposal, it had a lot more of a calming effect because it wasn't so dramatic. And then we can also talk about hedonic valence, which states that pleasant media depictions make people feel happier. So this is kind of a really good explanation of how rom-coms make us feel and how they kind of just help us feel happier and help us escape. And then kind of going off that, we can also talk about how media is very stereotypical and how often sets expectations, false expectations for real life. Media has the capacity to convey messages about groups of people that can often be misleading. So, for example, if we consume a lot of rom-coms, we are continually seeing couples go through the same basic structure of relationships, where they meet someone, they go through a trial together, the boy wins the girl back, and they live happily ever after. And I think relationships go through lots of different phases, and they can go through this phase to an extent, but often our minds are framed into thinking that this is how every romantic relationship should go. And when it doesn't go this way, or it is hard, then people think it's not right. So they immediately either break up or think something's wrong, where it's important for us to remember that we are all human and there is no definite or finite way to fall in love. So then, just in conclusion, after coding these two TV shows, I found that the romantic relationship between the characters in the American rom-com increased exponentially faster than the relationship between characters in K-drama. And this has led me to personally believe that that is why K-dramas are becoming more and more popular among various audiences. I think that just culturally, American rom-coms, as seen in Beauty and the Baker, approach more social issues in like a dramatic way, where in a K-drama they kind of stick to more conservative views, and it's really an escape, because I think, well, for me, when I go watch a rom-com, I don't necessarily want to like question or like think about all of the social issues and how I need to approach things. I kind of just want an escape. And so I think it's a lot more calming for me when, like, I want a more calming experience when watching a rom-com, but it's definitely different for everyone. And I do think just culturally, America is more like forward thinking, maybe, where they approached just like really quickly on in the TV series, physical intimacy and like a gay relationship, and just kind of the like Latino family kind of American dream. And then they also had a lot of feministic qualities or roles in the movie. And so it's a lot more forward thinking, where, like I said before, the K-drama is very more conservative, where it's the guy, kind of the rags to riches story. And so I think it just depends on person to person what people like. But I think especially during COVID that K-dramas became more popular because of this kind of calming effect and really an escape from reality. And so, yeah, that's what I decided to do my final presentation on. I really enjoyed kind of watching these two TV series and thinking about how they differ. And I definitely am a big fan of K-dramas now. And yeah, I really enjoyed this class this semester. So thank you for all you have done.